She falls down. Here comes Alyssa Thomas, knee in the groin. And here she comes, fist on the throat. Knee in the groin, fist on the throat. Alyssa Thomas doing what Alyssa Thomas does, showing what a talentless hack she is.
When getting attacked, if the league doesn't step up and protect her, things are going to get ugly real fast.
The ball was loose, the bodies were tangled, and in the middle of that scramble, a closed fist landed somewhere it never should have. Caitlin Clark dropped to the floor, clutching her throat, while Alyssa Thomas stepped right over her, and the referees, standing a few feet away, called absolutely nothing. No whistle, no flag, just silence, until the slow-motion replay hit social media and the internet did the job the officials refused to do. Within hours, this wasn't a basketball play anymore. It had become a full-blown controversy with millions of eyes on it. And now Steph Curry, one of the most respected and measured voices in the entire sport, has decided to step into a conversation that technically isn't even his to enter. He doesn't play in this league. He doesn't have to say a word. But he did. And when someone with that kind of credibility finally breaks his silence, you have to wonder what he saw in that footage that made staying quiet impossible. What exactly did Steph Curry say regarding the incident? And are his comments truly as pointed and unfiltered as the internet is making them out to be? It raises a broader question about cross-league dynamics. Specifically, why an NBA superstar with nothing personally at stake would choose to insert himself into a WNBA controversy. Furthermore, this situation forces us to look closer at the player involved, questioning whether this narrative is merely a reaction to one reckless moment, or if Alyssa Thomas is building a longer pattern of aggressive play that is finally catching up to her reputation. The breakdown in officiating also demands scrutiny, as one has to wonder where the game officials were standing when the hit occurred directly in front of them, and how a contact violation like that managed to go completely unflagged in real time. Perhaps the most lingering question of all centers on league-wide double standards, because if this exact altercation had happened to almost any other player in the WNBA, it is worth wondering if Steph Curry or anyone outside of Indiana would even be discussing it right now. By the time this video ends, you will know exactly what Steph Curry said, the full context behind why he chose to speak out, and why his specific reaction is landing so differently than the usual wave of reactionary online outrage. We are going to go frame by frame through the controversial throat punch itself, examining closely whether the league's official one-game suspension actually matches the true severity of what happened on the floor, while also tracing Alyssa Thomas's history of aggressive physical plays that have walked this same dangerous line in the past. Additionally, we will unpack how the Indiana coaching staff and locker room responded behind closed doors once the cameras finally stopped rolling. But before we dive deep into all of those details, do you believe a one-game suspension was even remotely close to enough for a closed fist to the throat? Or did the league drop the ball by not issuing a far stricter penalty? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments section below.
To review calls. You understand the WNBA can review calls and act retroactively and make sure that you hand down appropriate punishment where you deem necessary. That's how you get able to police the league. You don't just let the game end and say, okay, well, that happened. There's nothing we can do about it now. The NBA says, no, we'll revisit the situation and we'll come back and revisit you if the film shows us that you're culpable. And that's what the WNBA needs to start doing, because you're not the NBA. You don't have an 11-year, $77 billion contract.
What Stephen A. Smith just laid out is a direct, substantial challenge to how the WNBA polices its own product, and it lands with significantly more weight than most of the commentary you will hear this week. His detailed comparison to the NBA's review system is not just casual observation, but rather a functional blueprint that the league has ignored for far too long, while its biggest star continues to absorb physical hits that officials are completely missing on the floor. Allowing a game to end and treating a missed whistle as an unrecoverable mistake is a fundamental structural failure rather than a case of bad luck, and Caitlin Clark has paid a steep physical price for that institutional failure more than anyone else in the league. Where Stephen A. truly gets it right is his framing around financial and cultural leverage, pointing out that the WNBA is currently riding a wave of unprecedented growth fresh off a major collective bargaining victory, with Clark serving as the primary engine behind almost all of that momentum. Protecting the specific marquee player who is driving that historic growth is not an optional luxury at this stage of development, but is instead an overdue business necessity. And that growing sense of urgency is exactly what builds directly into the critical questions you are already forming. It is entirely natural to wonder why a league benefiting so massively from Caitlin Clark's presence has been so slow to construct a reliable accountability system designed to protect her on the floor. It raises serious concerns when it takes a viral clip and intense outside pressure for a dangerous hit against a marquee star to even be reviewed after the fact, questioning whether the WNBA is truly capable of building an NBA-style replay and discipline process quickly enough to keep up with how often she is targeted. One cannot help but wonder how many uncalled physical hits she already absorbed before this specific incident finally forced the league to take action. Ultimately, the most challenging question to shake is whether the league has been slow to protect her precisely because she has become a complicated paradox, far too valuable to lose, yet seemingly too convenient to leave exposed to the physical elements of the game.
Aspirations, no doubt, but there's still a lot more work to be done. Don't get in the way of the cash cow. You don't sit up there and pave a way for her and don't compete. Nobody's implying that. But you certainly ride that tidal wave of popularity and use it to your advantage to build the game, not compromise and hurt the game by taking her out whenever you get the opportunity to do so. That's not smart. That's not smart at all.
The honest reality is that the WNBA absolutely possesses the necessary infrastructure to implement a retroactive review process, especially since the NBA has already proven that this disciplinary model works effectively. There is no justifiable excuse for the league not adapting these rules sooner to protect a high-profile player who is currently carrying so much of the sport's mainstream spotlight. This institutional hesitation is not a matter of technical capability, but rather a reflection of a league that is still scrambling to catch up to the massive wave of attention Caitlin Clark brought to the sport almost overnight. Analysts like Stephen A. Smith are correct in pointing out that this intense conversation only exists because of who got hit, which is not a knock against her individual talent, but rather definitive proof of how much her presence means to the financial future of the league. Ultimately, protecting a marquee star is not an act of unfair favoritism, but is instead the smartest business move the WNBA can make for its own long-term growth, and the public urgency demanding that protection will only get louder from here.
When getting attacked, if the league doesn't step up and protect her, things are going to get ugly real fast.
What you are seeing here is a fundamentally flawed argument dressed up as progressive league management. Steph Curry rightly points out that the WNBA needs to adopt a strict, retroactive review system to protect its players, and he is completely spot on about the league's massive growth potential following its recent collective bargaining breakthroughs. But where this take completely derails is the dangerous insinuation that the league needs to bend its rules specifically to shield its cash cow from hard, physical basketball. Protecting players from dangerous non-basketball plays like a brutal throat punch is non-negotiable for player safety. However, treating one specific rookie like a fragile asset that veterans shouldn't compete hard against is an insult to the competitive integrity of women's basketball. The league absolutely needs to police the court better, but you cannot compromise the fiery competitiveness that actually makes the sport worth watching in the first place. You probably noticed the immediate contradictions here, leaving you to wonder how the league can ever find a fair balance. Is the WNBA genuinely failing to protect its players, or are we just hyper-focusing on the physicality because a marquee star is on the receiving end? If the front office starts handing down retroactive suspensions based on marketing value, does that completely ruin the integrity of the game? You have to ask yourself if veterans are actually crossing the line into malicious territory, or if this is just standard, hard-nosed basketball being blown out of proportion. The reality is that the WNBA is experiencing unprecedented growing pains, and implementing an unbiased review system is exactly how you fix this issue without showing favoritism. The league doesn't need to baby its stars, it just needs to enforce the rulebook consistently to ensure safety while letting intense rivalries flourish. This exact tension between marketing stars and maintaining raw physical competition is creating a massive divide across the entire basketball landscape.
I have no problem them upgrading this to a flagrant and suspending her because of the history that we've seen. We've seen acts that are not basketball related. That is not a basketball related act, what she did. No. She deserved to be suspended. This is not any other thing other than that she deserved that. They went back and looked at it.
What you are seeing here is a high-stakes breakdown of a critical breaking point for league discipline and accountability. Taking a hardline stance on the technical mechanics of the play is absolutely correct, but doing so simultaneously sets an incredibly complex precedent for the league as it moves forward. Calling out on-court actions that completely deviate from standard basketball plays is entirely right, as it reinforces the standard that a uniquely dangerous foul cannot simply be excused as mere competitive physicality. The league office made the correct football-style strategic pivot by actively reviewing the game tape retroactively to upgrade the penalty to an official suspension based on unnatural falling patterns and excessive contact. However, relying heavily on a player's past history to justify an immediate, severe punishment rather than judging the isolated incident strictly on its own merits pushes the conversation into a major gray area. This highly reactive policing approach raises the competitive stakes to an all-time high, signaling a massive, permanent shift in how the front office intends to govern its stars and enforce player safety. You probably noticed the sudden shift in disciplinary intensity here, leaving you to wonder what this means for the immediate future of the season. Is the league finally establishing a firm boundary against excessive physicality, or are they just reacting to the intense public outcry surrounding its most popular rookie? If past history is now a primary metric for upgrading fouls retroactively, how can players confidently know where the line is drawn during a heated game? You have to ask yourself if this strict ruling will actually deter dangerous plays, or if it will simply make defenders hesitant to play aggressive, high-stakes defense. Ultimately, it makes you question whether the front office is protecting the players or merely protecting the league's massive commercial momentum. Unpacking these hidden dynamics reveals a much deeper issue regarding how justice is handed down on the hardwood. The reality is that the WNBA is operating under an unprecedented microscope, and the front office is finally realizing that inconsistent officiating severely damages the integrity of the product. Upgrading this specific play to an official suspension was the only logical move available to maintain control over a narrative that was quickly spiraling into total media chaos. When a foul so clearly transcends standard physical play and directly endangers an athlete's physical safety, a firm message must be sent across the league regardless of a player's star status or veteran tenure. We have seen a distinct worrying pattern of escalating tension all season long, and allowing a blatant non-basketball act to slide without serious consequence would have set an incredibly dangerous baseline for all future matchups. By drawing a definitive line in the sand right now, the administration is actively prioritizing long-term structural integrity over short-term comfort. This critical decision to enforce stricter accountability completely alters the psychological landscape and the physical expectations for every single team competing for a championship. So when you strip away the noise, this entire saga comes down to one uncomfortable truth. The WNBA didn't get ahead of this controversy. It got dragged into accountability by a viral clip and a chorus of outside voices loud enough to force its hand. Stephen A. Smith's comparison to the NBA's review system exposed a league still building its infrastructure in real time, while the upgraded suspension proved the front office cares more about controlling the narrative than preventing the next dangerous play before it happens. And that's the real story here. Not one punch, but a pattern of reactive justice that only shows up after the cameras catch it. If you want the next overlooked moment broken down before it becomes a headline, this is exactly the channel to stick around for. So hit subscribe and stay ahead of the story.